I want to thank everyone for coming. This is a chance to look at some of the work we do behind the scenes to make CSC Live productions possible. So I brought a few pieces of equipment here. There we go. I brought a few pieces of the equipment and set it up here at the Sandoz Center to show how we would cover an event like this. But the twist is, normally all this stuff is at the back of the room or it's downstairs and out of the way. So I get to be presenter and show director at the same time and try to walk and chew gum and not trip over my shoelaces. So we'll see how it goes. First, I want to talk a little bit about how CSC Live got started and where we are today. Next, talk about some of the equipment that goes into the broadcasts. And along with the equipment, what are the worker roles? What do the people need to do to run the equipment and make the productions happen? And we have a few different ways to cover events depending on the event itself, worker availability, and what do we do if something goes wrong? And I want to leave time at the end of this for some questions. And I know you all got lots of questions. So a little bit of history. CSC Live, as we see it today, started in 2012, 10 years ago this fall, and I can't believe it's been 10 years already. But it's not that wasn't the beginning. Prior to 2012, we had some events that were live streamed. Alex Helmbrecht here, he was the sports information director in those days, and he was in charge of the athletic broadcasts. So that was home football, volleyball, and basketball games, if I'm remembering right. And a lot of those games were just the single camera that would be recording the game for team review, and that was tied into the broadcast. And then for audio, it would be from local radio station coverage. And I think John Axtell's voice appeared in a lot of those broadcasts. So in addition to the athletic broadcasts, we also ran broadcasts of the winter and spring commencement ceremonies. And Dwayne Jimison, who's also in the audience, he's our publication specialist, and he ran a lot of those productions in those old days. In 2012, Randy Ryan had started as the college president, and he wanted to expand what we were doing with live streaming coverage. So Dwayne and I worked in 2012. We prepared a list of equipment to purchase that would enable us to add multiple angles to athletic broadcasts and just generally improve the product. So I spent the late summer that year getting the equipment purchased and configured for use. The first home football game in September of 2012, we ran that. We did a 3-camera setup plus a fixed wide camera that showed the entire stadium. We had a microphone for ambient audio, and we had a commentator who was one of our students. So that game, it would be a little choppy here and there, but we got it out to the public successfully. And then over the next few years, I spent time working out what do our camera coverage options need to be for a given game, and where can I make improvements, whether they're in large or small ways. Where we're at now, we've added replay to some of our athletic broadcasts, and we can show the action on the big screens at the football field and in the Chacoin Center. 10 years on, we continue to provide broadcasts of the home football, volleyball, basketball, wrestling, and softball games. We do winter and spring commencement, and we stream a lot of the non-athletic events on campus. So the great thing for me has been working with all the student workers who make the productions possible. And over 10 years, it adds up to quite a few student workers. So what goes into a broadcast? Now, you may have seen people operating cameras or hunched over consoles pushing buttons. So I'm going to run through how these pieces connect and make the finished product for the viewers. So I want to talk about these elements generally in the context of a football game, but I'll jump around to other sports a little bit as needed. It's looking at things in terms of video sources, audio sources, switching, mixing, and routing, and then the final output. So for video sources, the most common type of video source is, of course, the camera. But productions often have additional video sources. We've got on-screen graphics that we can display, and the feed from the replay system. That's also a video source for us. On the audio side, audio sources include the microphones used by commentators. We've got the public address feed that we can pull in, and ambient audio. And then we also have pre-recorded audio that would go with any of the videos that we run, like during breaks. The video switcher is what we use to select all of these video sources. For most of the athletic broadcasts, we have a camera that shows a wide view of the action and follows that, but then we could switch into a close-up camera following specific pieces of action. And on the audio side, kind of similar, we can have the ambient audio running throughout in the background and then pull in the commentator as needed. Or we can mute ambient and commentator and just run the pre-recorded audio for a commercial during a break. All of these video and audio sources go into the switcher and mixer in some way. For simpler productions, we hook the cameras directly into the switcher, but we get some productions that are a little more complicated. And in those cases, we need to route the video sources to multiple destinations. For example, sources from the cameras would have to go into the switcher for live coverage, and then we also send those to the replay unit, where we can record those clips and arrange them for later playback. So with the video router, we can take a single video source and send it to multiple destinations. As an example, let's look at the program output. Now for us, program output is the finished video signal. That's what gets sent to the viewers at home. For a football broadcast, we might send program output to the encoder that builds the live stream and sends it out over the internet, a recorder for our internal archive. We might have a monitor in the control room that we can look at. Let's see, the big screen out on the field, and a half dozen monitors throughout the press box. So that's one signal being duplicated to 10 different destinations. This is a fun one here. A brief engineering discussion. One of my tasks is to handle the installation and connection of all of these pieces of equipment down to the wiring in the floors that goes out to each camera. And I like to be able to know what's connected to what, where's it all going, why is it connected that way, if I need to troubleshoot. If we run into problems maybe 5 minutes before the game starts or even in the middle of a broadcast, if something goes wrong, can I troubleshoot that? So number one, I got to have a flashlight handy if I need to go hunting through an equipment rack. But it's also important to note that you can't really show up 5 minutes before the game starts and expect things to run. I'm usually on site at least 2 hours before each game, so I can get the cameras taken out, get them turned on, hooked up, test those, test my graphics, make sure the team names are spelled correctly. All of that stuff has to be checked beforehand, and if you don't do it, something's going to go wrong. So with all of these audio and video sources, we got switchers, mixers, replay systems. Running the full broadcast doesn't happen with just me. My role as the overall director is to make sure that each broadcast goes out in some way. That's where the student workers come in. Without student workers, it's down to just me running a single camera, maybe with some ambient audio in the background. But we get student workers, our broadcasts can expand. It's not just a wide camera. We've got the close-up shots, we've got replay, we've got commentary, and that's what makes for a successful broadcast. So each camera operator in a production makes specific camera moves to cover specific action. On the wide camera side, that's where we show overall action on the field. And the wide camera might be a simple setup. It might be just follow from left to right, right to left. Now that's the basic style, but we have the camera operator on the wide camera has to be prepared to handle certain arrangements on the field. Some plays require a tighter shot, some are more loosely arranged and need a bit of a wider shot. And then we have kickoff takes a different coverage style compared to down by down action, compared to point after attempts. And then there's coverage options we have to consider during breaks in the action. So the close-up camera operator, they'll follow the key players as the play unfolds. The better that operator can anticipate the action or just follow it along, the better those shots are going to be. Is it going to be a quick snap or a fake? Is it going to be is the quarterback going to get sacked? Got to be ready for all of that. So successful close-up shots can look fantastic on the replay system if we can run them in slow motion. And we've got shots like that crowd shot to consider, all the various close-ups that we can have, cheerleader formations, the crowd celebrating, the band playing, coach and player reactions. And we can sometimes bring in another close-up variation, which is a ground camera for football. For the coverage I've discussed so far, that's cameras mounted on the roof of the press box looking down toward the field. But with the ground camera, we get that new perspective on the action. And we can get the sideline shot spectators. And the one I like most, of course, is if we get somebody running in toward the end zone, right toward the camera, show that in slow motion on the replay system. So we use the replay system for football, volleyball, and basketball broadcasts. As I mentioned, each camera goes into the switcher, and it also gets routed into the replay unit. The replay system records each of those video sources, and the replay operator can work with those recordings and play back specific clips. They can show those on the fly. We've got several possibilities when it comes to replays. For football, we try to incorporate a replay after every normal play. So we show the play live with the wide camera, and then the replay operator works with that recording, selects from the close-up camera, and cues that up ready to play. Then the switcher operator switches over to the replay system, and we play the clip out. And we got to run that fast. So getting the synchronization correct is a bit of training in itself. The replay system that we use can run clips in slow motion, and we can also switch between different camera angles on the fly. So that allows us we can show the quarterback making the pass from the roof camera and then switch to the ground camera and the receiver makes the catch. We can add slow motion for the entire clip, or we can slow down just a key portion of the clip. The replay system can also be used to build playlists of clips, and we can run those during breaks in the action, timeouts, halftime, and that kind of thing. So I mentioned cameras being the primary video source we have, but we've also got on-screen graphics and pre-recorded videos. So those all are generated by our graphics computer, and we use an open source program called Casper CG to generate those graphics, to display those graphics. So we got the interface here, and that's what I'm using tonight to display all of these graphics. Casper CG can display graphics, can display the overlays on top of the broadcast. So we have those like lower third names, scoreboards, maybe full screen graphics, or bugs, which are the little logos in the corner of the screen. Those elements can be static images or animated video clips. So like I said, we use Casper CG to display all of those graphics. If we're running commercials during breaks, we run those through Casper CG. So a bit of a technical discussion here. The graphics computer outputs two signals, fill and key. Fill is the visible graphic itself, and then the key signal is a black and white or a grayscale image, and that is running in the background, and it's telling the graphics computer what to display and what not to display. Black areas are transparent and let the background video show through. White areas show the image itself, the graphic on top, and then the gray areas are partially transparent. So what happens if we don't have a key signal? The graphic might look like this. We got the graphic up there, but the rest of it is black. With the key signal, now we can show the video behind it. Okay. So I mentioned we have the potential for multiple video sources. We also have multiple audio sources. For each sports broadcast, we might have a microphone for the commentators, a microphone for ambient sounds. We can pull in a feed from the public address system and bring that in as needed. So we'll use that for, if we've got a flag on the play, we need to get the ref audio, we bring that in through the PA system. And then we've got audio associated with any pre-recorded videos that we might run. I've mentioned the switcher operator a few times. Let's take a closer look at what that person does. The switcher operator chooses which video source is going to be live at a given time. Now this person needs to be paying attention to every video source that's coming in. And they do that through the multiviewer. And this is what the multiview looks like. Normally it's not a recursive image like this one, but displaying it like this, we get a little bit of a recursive image. So that's kind of fun. The multi-view is then a grid of video sources, and we've got a preview and program window. Preview there on the left is a video source that's on deck, and we can quickly cut into that video source. So if I press my cut button, now what was in preview is switched over to program. What was in program switches over to preview. And then I can switch back to my preview source again. All right. Let's switch back to a normal view here. So the switcher operator is generally acting as the director of each show, and they're communicating with the camera operators through headsets. So the headsets, it might be a direction to adjust the zoom setting on the camera, or it might be a note to the replay operator, grab that specific piece of action that just happened, put it in the playlist, or maybe get it ready to play back immediately. So for most of our productions, I'll take the role of switcher operator and show director so I can communicate directly with my student workers and adjust shots. That gives me a close view of the action. But as I train student workers and they get more comfortable with how productions are run, eventually they step in to be on the switcher, and they'll be the director of the show while I sit back and watch and provide additional direction. But we get to a point where, yeah, they can handle it pretty well. So we have student workers who can provide commentary for each broadcast. We do two types of commentary, and ideally I have two student workers to provide that. We have play-by-play coverage, which is describing the action as it happens. Play-by-play can be as detailed as the commentator cares to make it. The important thing is be able to quickly identify all the players on the field and clearly convey the action to the audience. The other type of commentary is color or analytical coverage. That's commentary about beyond what's happening right now. It can include statistical analysis, such as how many interceptions has the quarterback thrown this game or this season. How does that compare? It might be from interviews that the person has done in the week leading up to the game with players and coaches. And then you've got, what else do I have here? Comparisons to be made between other games. So we might have games that played this season or the historical record of these two teams throughout the years. And how does that compare to this season? In any case, that the commentators need to have in-depth knowledge of the sport in question, and the more practice they can do, the better. So I'm often listening in during productions, and I may send a text message down to the score table where my commentators are at and say, let's adjust how we're doing it here, or I'll work with them after the game or leading up to the next game to adjust things. And each of the commentators that I've had over the years, they have specific strengths and weaknesses, so I'm encouraging them to work on strengths and weaknesses so that each new broadcast is going to be a little bit better than the last one. So back around to training in general. As each new student worker joins the crew, I work with them on camera operation to start with. We go over the cameras and tripods that we use for CSC Live productions and how to use those to get smooth shots. And I'll go over the various shots that I've talked about tonight. Once the student worker is working a game, again, I'm communicating with them on the headset to really fine-tune shots, specific shots for specific types of action. Like if we've got an injury, how we might need to handle that for this particular game. On the replay side, I review that system with the student worker before the game starts. And usually what I do is have them watch me run it for a few plays, maybe the first quarter, and then I have them sit down at it and try their hand at it. What I've also found is it's really good training for student workers to train other student workers on the replay system. It just seems to flow naturally for them. Training is a continuous process throughout the broadcasting season. But a lot of times we'll reach a point maybe midway through the fall sports season where the student workers are feeling comfortable with the action, comfortable with the flow of the game and the camera movements they need to make, whatever it might be. And that's when we really get some cool coverage from all of these events. So next is the cascade of coverage based on worker availability. Like I said, it might just be me running a single camera if I don't have anybody else available. If I get one person, I put them on the wide camera, then I'm on the switcher, and I can switch between that wide camera and a fixed camera. The nice thing about switching between a wide camera and a fixed camera is if the person on the wide camera needs to adjust their shot, like I'm saying, we go from field coverage to a timeout, and I say, let's run down to the home team's bench and get a shot of that. The camera operator may be able to smoothly move that down, but if it's windy, for example, or if they're just not quite as experienced as they'd like to be, it might be a jerky movement. So I would switch to the fixed camera, have them set up their new shot, and then switch back to them. And that way we hide any of that jerky movement. Because what happens is, if you're not careful, movement can look, that looks kind of awkward, right? So we would want to hide that with another camera. And we can do that. Let's do a little switch up here, there. Now I'm switching my other camera back, it's ready to go, and now I'm back to that new angle without seeing any weird movements. So if we have two student workers, I can put one person on the wide camera, one person on close-ups, and I'm back switching between those two cameras. With three people, now I can add replay and take more advantage of that close-up camera. If I get four people, now I can add my ground camera and get more close-ups still. With 5 student workers, I can put the 5th person on the switcher, and then I can sit back and sip iced tea, right? No, I'm still keeping an eye on the production, but it lets me keep kind of a broader look because I'm not just focused on running the switcher. And it's really nice in those situations. I can run out and check a camera setting if something weird is happening that we can't address over the headsets. So it's really nice to have extra student workers. But of course, I haven't gone into the commentary side. So here's what it would look like. The ideal crew, 7 student workers, if my math is right. What I have to do for most productions then is have at least one person on commentary. Even if I don't have anybody else, then I'm still on a camera. But get one person on commentary, and then as more workers are available, fill in the camera, replay, switching operations. Next, a brief look at how we arrange the CSC Live cameras for each sport. For football, we've got 2 cameras on the roof of the press box, wide shot and close-up shot, and then 1 camera on the ground. Now, the ground camera for football is pretty cool because it can be run wirelessly. So it'd normally be in the end zone, but they can then rove around the sidelines on the home side and get shots that way. And then if we need to scale it back, we pull the ground camera, then we pull the close-up camera, and we just have the wide shot. And that'll be a common thing for volleyball and basketball as well. It's always fun to watch these. Of course, when I watch some of these games back, I go, oh, why did we move that way? Volleyball's similar to football. We have the wide camera and the close-up camera up on the balcony looking toward the long axis of the court. And then the third camera for close-ups is on a small platform on the west side of the arena looking toward the broad side of the net. For basketball, again, similar to volleyball and football, we have the wide camera and the close-up camera up on the balcony. The third camera for close-ups is a ground-level camera now, wirelessly connected like football, and that's usually set up behind the baseline, whichever side the home team is driving toward, so we can get those slam dunk shots, hopefully. Wrestling can really be covered with 1 camera, but as the wrestlers move around the ring, they can get obscured, or the ref might step through and temporarily block the view. So if we get another camera set up at a 90-degree angle from the first one, that gives us more coverage options depending on how the wrestlers get arranged. And then the third camera would just be, again, 90 degrees from the second one, so we get kind of wraparound coverage for wrestling. Softball is a tough one. If we had the cameras up on cranes or poles, that would be helpful, but we can't do that. So what I do is set a small fixed wide-angle camera on the fence behind the catcher, and that gives me a pretty good view of the infield. And then I have another camera outside the fence just past the visiting team's bullpen, and that's run by a student worker. That gives us a shot of new batters approaching the plate and then proper fielding action. It's still not ideal. You'll see most of the major league broadcasts where it's elevated, and we don't have the real elevated positions for the cameras. It's on the to-do list. The other thing we have to do is watch out for foul balls. So what I found is that particular location just past the bullpen on the visiting side, it gets fewer foul balls relative to a lot of other areas on the field. But even so, I'm always reminding the student workers, keep your eye on the ball there and be ready to duck. Multi-camera coverage of athletic and non-athletic events, it's increasingly becoming an expected product for colleges and universities. The broadcast can be complex, as you see with all this stuff, but when everything's working correctly and you have the workers, the broadcast can be a really cool way to see the game if you can't make it in person, or if you want to watch it again after attending in person. So I'd encourage everyone to visit our website, chadronstate.tv, and that's where you'll find the upcoming broadcasts and the past broadcasts. So if you can't make it to the next game in person, take a look over there, and hopefully it'll be another good broadcast from all of us at CSC Live. So with that, I want to open it up to any questions that anybody might have, and I can move these cameras around a little bit too and show how those work. So any questions at the moment?
Daniel, I'm curious how long it takes a student to become adept at switching.
Well, it kind of depends on their temperament first. If they're grasping how we switch and when we need to switch. So a lot of it will be saying, all right, we're staying on the wide camera generally. All right, they scored a touchdown. Close-up camera is getting a celebration. Now we can switch to the close-up camera and show that. So a lot of it would be watching me run it, say, like I do for replay. Watch me run the switcher for the first quarter, and then here's how I'm doing it. Or I'll set them down at it, and I'm right next to them, just guiding through. All right, now switch to the wide camera. All right, now switch over to the close-up camera. So it's kind of like a paint-by-numbers thing. But a lot of the broadcasts are kind of regulated like that, where normal play is wide camera, and then here's a situation where we can switch into the close-up. And if they remember that and get that pattern down, that helps them run things smoothly next time.
So within the course of any given season, somebody can pick that up?
Oh yeah, most of the student workers have. And one of the cool things is, in the last few years, we get more and more high schools that are doing live streaming setups, even small high schools. So I've had more student workers come in with past experience. Like in the early years, you'd hope for student workers that maybe they filmed football for the team or basketball or whatever. So they'd come in with some knowledge of camera movements, and we'd just have to clean that up and smooth out those movements. But more and more, we're seeing them with a little bit of live streaming experience, and sometimes a lot of live streaming experience.
That's great to do it with students.
Oh, it's so satisfying. I mean, especially if they start out rough at the beginning of the season, then that midway point or maybe the end of the season, and they've got the flow down.
Any class credit given?
So we've done internships. Everything that we do is bi-weekly student workers or work studies, but I've had a few of them do internships, and some of them have done internships with CSC Live directly. Some of them have done it with college relations more generally, like not just doing the CSC Live productions, but helping me produce some of the marketing videos and that kind of thing. I think years back we had a student who was doing some of those marketing videos, even did a brief piece with Lucinda on the campus landscape, I think back in 2016. So that was a nice project.
I just think those would be great skills to be able to walk away from college with.
Yep, I think so. One of the other things I'm excited about is we've got a media production program in the communication area now, and Julian here is in charge of that. So he's training up students in the classroom, and I'm hoping we'll get a few of those students to join the crew as things progress.
Nice job, Daniel. I can't believe you still have that Miller Bowl photo from 20.
I've got to hang on to those.
It's certainly come a long ways in a decade. I'm curious, do you get a lot of requests from either coaches or players or community members for clips?
Oh yeah.
So how do you parse that out? You know, a football game's 3 hours long.
So what I do for our football team right now, they have asked for a copy of the broadcast. So with the streaming platform that we use, I can just generate a link so they can download the whole file. And then, so every Monday after the weekend, I get that link and email it over to the football team. And then if they're using it for highlight videos or whatever, they can cut it up and edit it as they need to. And I think I did the same thing for volleyball games a few years back, but they haven't asked for those recently.
And then another kind of comment, question. I appreciate how you've documented this historical timeline, you know, within the last decade. But talk a little bit about the digital asset management of the file itself.
Sure.
I'm unique to this because I sign off on whatever your purchases are, but I know you have a pretty robust cataloging system and archiving system. I think it might be kind of interesting.
So I think one of the interesting things that I don't have is, like, the football team uses a product called Huddle, right? And that, I think they've got a team of people, maybe not paid very well, I don't know what the details are, but each game gets tagged play-by-play, right, through Huddle. And I'm not familiar with that in any detail. But what they can do then is, like, do a text search or just chapter by chapter going through different plays of a game. I don't have that functionality on my end. But what I do is, like, I'm recording this right now, and then I'm going to edit this for YouTube. So all the games that we broadcast, I archive those. Whatever the finished production is that I'm outputting through my program view, that's what gets recorded. And then I save that on local storage. So I've got 10 years worth of all the home games, all the music events, graduations that I've covered. So I keep those on hand. Have I used much in the way of those athletic games? Not really, but at some point, hopefully, like on the athletic side, we'll get somebody there who might be making a historical project, and we've got now 10 years worth of assets that are reasonable quality that they can use. And then a lot of the other stuff goes on to YouTube for more public archiving. So all the graduation ceremonies, those are on YouTube. We don't do music stuff. We get copyright issues with music, so it's limited on what we can do with those. But a lot of the speakers, like later this semester, I'm going to live stream the social work conference, and that'll be a day-long event with multiple speakers. So that's going to be archived on YouTube in, I think, speaker by speaker or subject by subject. But then that'll also be available live for that 8-hour period of that day. And the viewers, you don't just have to watch it live. You could go back after the game is finished and watch it then. If you can't watch it live at noon, come back at 8 p.m., watch it then, and that's no problem. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how many viewers you get on the live streaming and the archive stuff? And then my second question is, are you always able to get enough student workers?
Good questions, both. And what I meant to do with this presentation is repeat the questions for the viewers at home, because we have a hard time getting good audio from the audience side during Q&A sessions, and naturally it slips my mind. So Mary's question is on how many viewers do we get for broadcasts, and can we track those? And then the second question is on student workers. So for the first question, I'm trying to get a track of at least rough viewer numbers, and that involves getting into Google Analytics, which I'm still learning because it can be opaque. But I can say generally the football broadcasts, those get the most viewers by far, and that would be, I'll say 500 would be a low number, and then some games we've had as many as 1,200, 1,500, something like that. So we get good numbers for football. The other events, the other sports are definitely under 1,000. Some games might only be 100 people. Some games might only be 50 people. It really depends on kind of how the team is doing that season. And the other thing is, a lot of our viewers are they're not Chadron State College viewers. They're viewers for the other team. So we've got two audiences like that. We've got fans of Chadron, we've got fans of Adams State, for example. So one of the things I tell my commentators is, we've got to be careful not to be biased. We don't want to have a home team bias. Yeah, we're here, we're supporting Chadron State, that's who our employer is, so we've got a little bit of that, but we want to be fair and have fair coverage for both teams. So the second question was about, is it difficult to get student workers? And some years are easier than others. Some years I've had 5 or 7 student workers that I can pull from for different events. This year is real limited, and I think that's a common thread, not just here at CSC, but nationwide, worldwide. Like right now I have 2 student workers, and I'm in the process of getting a third one hired. So if any of you know of students who want to work on video productions, or if anybody watching does, feel free to contact me, and we can certainly set something up.
And then in addition to full year, then you're also challenged at times when you've got events, basketball games and the like that come up during break, when your students theoretically don't have to be here.
Yep. Yeah, so the question or the comment there is about what are the students doing during breaks? And it's very, very correct, John. So graduation is a key thing. Semester ends, the students are out of here. So it's difficult to say, hey, can you stick around for graduation? And I'm not going to say you have to stick around. That's not my style. The students are working hard enough during the year, and if they're ready to go home, more power to them. So for graduation ceremonies especially, I have to figure out, am I going to be just using fixed camera angles that I can switch between? Or maybe Dwayne might step in and run a camera. I think he did that last year. Alex, I may have run cameras, I can't remember. We've got a graduate assistant in Abigail here, and she's been kind enough to stick around and run cameras for some of those graduation events. But yeah, so we just had our fall midterm break here, and for our football broadcast, I've only got 2 student workers right now again. So my commentator stuck around, and he covered our football game on Saturday and volleyball on Sunday. But the other student worker who would normally run a camera out of town, and that's fine again. So I ran the camera for both of those broadcasts. So it can be busy. It can be long weekends.
How challenging was the pandemic for you, both technically and logistically and time-wise, given things like virtual graduation where you had a whole lot of pieces that you had to record in advance? And if I remember correctly, I believe you broadcast at least 1 play during that time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So the question is about coverage during the pandemic. And we didn't really shut down during the pandemic. So Yeah, we did virtual commencements, which was, it was a lot of work for me ahead of time. I was in charge of putting those together. So I recorded all the speakers in the studio. I set up the names that would scroll down the screen for all, Bachelor of Applied Science and everything else. And then scheduled that to run on our YouTube channel at 10 a.m. Saturday morning for commencement. So people could watch that live, and we tried to make that as much as possible, at least in the spirit of getting a graduation ceremony out. I think the cool thing with that was we got a few photos back from students. They had put on a gown, they had their diploma, or they were standing next to the TV when their name came up on screen. So that was a cool thing, at least get a little bit of that product out. So yeah, and then whatever else we were doing for the pandemic, we were planning to do 2 football games. One of them got canceled. But we did do 1 football game for pandemic. We had several volleyball games. I had to think back because the volleyball schedule got shifted to spring games in spring of 21, if I'm remembering right. Fortunately, we had a pretty good number of student workers available. So, and I run the slideshow here. Now, we'll come back to that. You may have seen in the slideshow, or when I was talking about camera operators, we had camera operators with their masks on. There was no audience in attendance for some of those games, but we were still there covering that and getting a stream out so people could still watch the game.
What would you say this is a 2-part question. What was your triumph, your greatest achievement, and what was your biggest challenge to overcome?
So biggest triumph or best achievement and biggest challenge. Those are so difficult, Dwayne. I think just a general triumph is when I've got enough student workers on and we're covering a football game and firing on all cylinders, because I really like seeing that action. You get the play live and then the replay, you bring that in, boom, you're showing that on close-up camera. The camera operators are following the action cleanly. It just looks good. You got a ground camera, you get the touchdown run in, some celebration after that, and then somebody that's also on the replay, they're building those playlists. So we get timeouts, we're showing a few clips of action. That's a really satisfying game at the end of the day for that. So the challenge side, it might just be the amount of time that it takes to run these. If I'm not dealing with, do I have enough student workers to run the broadcast the way I'd like? What do I need to do to make that work? Or it's another full weekend of games that I have to cover, so I've got to work that into my schedule. So coming up, we have district track. Is it district track, right? Or conference track? So conference track that we're hosting here at Chadron, out on the outdoor track. And we've never live streamed a track meet before, but we've got to live stream this one. So I need to figure out what can I do for coverage to get at least some sort of coverage of running events, infield events for fielding. We've got the throws area that's off to the side. I've got to figure out how to get those broadcast out. Oh, and there's softball games going on that weekend too. So I've got to have softball running as well. It's probably going to be a combination of fixed camera angles, and we've got the remote control cameras. So like this one here that's showing me, I can do preset shots with these cameras, and that's going to really be helpful if I need to swing over to the jump pit or the finish line or the starting line for a race. And that should help get at least coverage of most of what's going on for those track meets. What else we got? Oh, this is a fun one. I don't think we've put this one in, so here's everybody that's attending. Thank you so much for being here. So we have these 2 remote control cameras that can help with those productions. And long term, that's what I'm hoping to see is I get more of these remote control cameras. I can permanently install them in the Chacoin Center for football, and then that lessens the setup time for me. I wouldn't necessarily have to haul the cameras out to the various locations. It would be more of a couple students in the control room with the control panel adjusting those cameras remotely. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And then long term, I imagine we've already got some rudimentary systems that can automatically follow players on the court, on the field. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more of that, especially as it gets more reliable and able to follow those people. So we may be seeing less of a need for student workers. I don't know that that's a good thing, because I think that human element of knowing intimately how to move the camera and how to get the shot, it's going to be difficult for the AI systems or the machine learning systems to replicate that. 50 years from now, yeah, I suppose, but at least in the near term, we're going to have our student workers. We're going to keep them busy in some way. And on the commentary side, I don't know. I still want the human element for the commentary side.
You explained the switcher and different things. Can you talk about the Teradek unit that gives the, or the encoder that gives the signal to?
So I don't. Sure. So I'm not live streaming this event, which of course is kind of like, it's CSC Live, and you're not live streaming it. Yep, we're just recording it. So I mentioned how the program output, all the various places it needs to go, we send it to an encoder. And what we use is, it's a Teradek VidiU, it's got a weird spelling, but that's the hardware encoder that takes the raw video signal that I'm sending out, compresses that down, and sends it over the internet. And that goes to our streaming provider. So then when people go to chadronstate.tv or the RMAC website, or maybe they're following a link through the athletic schedule, they're getting onto that streaming service and watching the stream through that. And so I'm sending the service that compressed web stream. Hopefully that answered it. And there's all sorts of other details I could get into, like 100-meter cable length limit for the video signals that we run. So if I'm figuring out how am I going to set up cameras for a venue like outdoor track, I know I've got a 100-foot or 100-meter limit, about a 300-foot limit for how far I can run cables. And if I need to run farther than that, I need to switch to fiber optic cables or have a little converter box inline to amplify that signal and keep it going. So that's one of those challenges of how can I arrange this and still make everything work? So it's interesting. It leads to headaches, but at the end of the day, it's still interesting. Any other questions?
During sports broadcasts, you show some replays. You don't show replays on controversial calls. Is that a school policy? Is that an RMAC policy? Is that an NCAA policy?
So the question is about showing replays for controversial calls. And there's a multi-part answer there. So number one, on the commentator side, the rule is the commentators can't question the calls of the ref. It might be a flagrant, blatant, bad call. They're not going to say it as such. That is conference policy. And I think in terms of not being biased, we had a commentator last year, or the last 2 years, he came up with a nice encapsulation that he would say before each game about how we respect the ruling of the officials on the field. They may see things that we don't see up here or that you don't see at home, so we're going to respect their rulings. So that's part of it. Now, like on the basketball side, we just got a rule update for women's basketball that if there's a video board in the arena, like we have at Chacoin, we cannot show replays when the ref is reviewing the game tape. So at certain points, the ref might step over to the score table and they're reviewing the recording of the game that's being made by another system. While they're doing that to check for a rules violation or whatever, we can't show a replay of the time in question that they're reviewing. That was NCAA. Yep. Like I remember I can't remember if it's just baseball or baseball and softball. They've got strict rules on, again from NCAA, on if there's a video board at the softball field or the baseball field, you can't show replays that would undermine the calls made by the officials. We don't have a video board out there, so we're not bound by that. But if we ever do get that, we have to be aware. So it's a question of keeping an eye on what are the NCAA rules? Does the conference have specific rules? And we don't necessarily have a school policy beyond that. If it's a if the conference asks for it, we're going to follow along with that. So that's a good question. Yeah, Mary.
Any funny faux pas you can share?
Oh yeah, faux pas. It's a normal thing, and Abigail is here. She's been on the crew, so she knows I've said this. I expect the workers to make mistakes. If I expected perfection, I would be a pretty bad boss. So I tell them, you're going to make mistakes. It's fine. The trick is, we want to review it. Is there a way we can avoid that next time? And I will. I'll mess up on the switcher. One of the common things is you choose the wrong video source and you're trying to show the action on the field and you're showing the random view of the camera that's not being used right now. And then, or another one is, like I mentioned, we have the preview and program left and right. About once a season, you can expect you'll start watching the preview side and thinking that's live, and then what's being sent out is some random camera. I did that. I think it was a volleyball game within the last few weeks. I did that for a couple minutes and then, okay, let's reset, get back to normal operation. So yeah, that's, and again, I don't want to put pressure on the students like that. It's enough knowing, hey, you're live now. You're out there. People are seeing what you're doing. Don't worry. You're going to screw up. They're not going to remember it. They're not going to worry about it. And we move on and we fix it for the next game. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other. So when Craig Conway, he worked on the crew with us for a few years. And the joke we always had, we get slow basketball games. And we're like, you know what we need to do? We need to get a greased up pig and just let it out on the floor. And let them chase after that for a few minutes. So that would have been fun. Any other questions? Abigail.
Worst weather experience.
Worst weather? Oh, the weather's a great one. See, I should have had a clip in reserve. 2012, I think it was at Colorado Mines. We had the Colorado Mines game. The game is starting underway, and it's kind of spitting. There's a little bit of rain. The forecast it looks iffy. And as that game got underway, it got colder and snowier and turned into a blizzard. So you can occasionally see on the archive video, a hand comes up, scoops the snow out in front of the lens, and then back to normal coverage. Yeah, we ended up pulling cameras off for that. We were down to, I think, just 2 cameras instead of 3. And I ended up on the roof, hunched over this tiny camera that we had at the time, trying to follow close-up shots on this little screen. So that was a goofy one. And then I think Abigail would have been present at another bad weather game. Let's see. So we did the COVID football game that we broadcast, and I always forget who we were playing against, but that one turned a little snowy. And I'm in the production room. It's a night game. I'm in the production room watching the snow swirling in under the lights and going, oh, it's beautiful out there. And knowing at the same time, the camera operators are miserable up on the roof because the snow's blowing right into their faces. It never fails. It doesn't matter which way the wind is blowing during a snow game. It's blowing into your face and into the camera when you're up on the roof there. So that one. And surprisingly, before I mention, softball games, we usually get some bad weather at the end of the season. We get the monsoon rolls through Chadron, and I'm always keeping an eye on the weather for these outdoor games. Do I need to get the weather covers on the cameras, make sure everything's bagged and taped up? And we'll get like a torrential downpour at the end of a softball game. Might get a lightning delay too. So we've got to deal with that. But surprisingly, so far, cross your fingers, we haven't lost anything to bad weather yet. I'm hoping, but like the cameras we use to cover this, they're 10 years old now. We've had them the whole time, and they've been in use. And we had one where the wind knocked the tripod over. I thought the camera was dead, and I had it sitting in the cabinet for a year. And then I thought, I'm going to take another look. I opened it up again, checked the connections, put it back together, and it fired up. And I was baffled that we hadn't actually lost that camera. So put it back into rotation, and it's been working reliably ever since. So yeah, again, knock on wood and hope that the equipment will keep going. Well, one of the things I talk to my student workers about is, just like we have to be careful about not questioning the refs' calls, we got to respect the equipment. we can't necessarily afford to replace cameras, certainly not on a weekly basis. We may not have the budget that semester to replace a camera. So I encourage them, be gentle when you're hooking the cables up and unplugging the cables. You got to treat it kind of gingerly and make it last, hopefully, at least another 5 years. Any other questions? No?
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.